2,000 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight had never touched and where pressure crushes human bones like brittle glass, something moved through the darkness. A remotely operated vehicle, descending through the void with its mechanical arms extended, suddenly illuminated a shape suspended in the water column. The creature appeared frozen, yet alive. 8 webbed arms hung from its body like the folds of a dark crimson cloak. 2 enormous eyes, each the size of a dog's, reflected the ROV's lights with an otherworldly blue glow. For a moment, the scientists watching the live feed from the research vessel above fell silent. Then, the creature inverted its cape-like arms, transforming into something that seemed pulled from nightmares. A living specter bristling with pale spines that jutted outward like the teeth of some ancient trap. The blood-red cloak opened wider, revealing a darkness within darkness, and from its arm-tips came something impossible. Clouds of glowing blue mucus that erupted into the water like underwater fireworks, each luminous particle hanging suspended in the current, creating a constellation of false stars in the eternal night of the deep sea. This was Vampiroteuthis infernalis, the vampire squid from hell, and everything humanity believed about this creature was about to change. The name conjures images of bloodthirsty predators lurking in oceanic trenches, but the truth is far stranger than any fiction. The vampire squid is not a vampire at all. It doesn't drink blood, it doesn't hunt living prey with the ferocity of its shallow water cousins, and remarkably, despite its scientific name suggesting infernal origins, it may be one of the most gentle creatures in the entire ocean. Yet this apparent contradiction, this mismatch between reputation and reality, is precisely what makes Vampiroteuthis infernalis one of the most extraordinary survivors in evolutionary history. To understand the vampire squid is to understand how life itself can persist in conditions that seem fundamentally incompatible with existence. It is to witness evolution's capacity for radical innovation. And it is to confront the unsettling reality that the deep ocean, which covers more than 60% of our planet's surface, remains more alien and unexplored than the surface of Mars. The story of the vampire squid begins not in the present, but in the unimaginably distant past, in ancient seas that predated the dinosaurs, in an era when life was experimenting with forms and functions that would either flourish or vanish forever. 330 million years ago, during the Carboniferous period, when Earth's continents were still assembling into the supercontinent Pangaea, and when giant dragonflies the size of hawks patrolled prehistoric swamps, the ancestors of the vampire squid emerged in the world's oceans. Fossil evidence discovered in the Bear Gulch limestone deposits of Montana revealed a creature called Silipsimopodi bidens, a 10-armed cephalopod that represents the oldest known ancestor of the vampiropod lineage, the evolutionary branch that would eventually lead to both octopuses and the vampire squid. This discovery, published in 2022, fundamentally rewrote our understanding of cephalopod evolution, pushing back the origins of this group by 82 million years. Silipsimopodi was different from the modern vampire squid in crucial ways. It possessed 10 fully functional arms, each lined with powerful suckers. An analysis of its fossilized remains suggests it was an active predator, possibly using those sucker-laden arms to pry small shelled creatures from their protective shells, or to hunt in the shallow waters of ancient seas. Its body was more muscular, more streamlined, more suited for the chase than the drift. It hunted, it pursued, it killed. The world it inhabited was vibrant with life, the sunlit waters of prehistoric oceans teeming with armored fish, primitive sharks, and the coiled shells of ammonites spiraling through the currents like living nautilus compasses. This was a world of abundance, of oxygen-rich waters, of competition and predation, conducted in the light. But time is the great sculptor of life, and over hundreds of millions of years, the descendants of Silipsimopodi began to change. The fossil record reveals this transformation in fragments scattered across geological time. Jurassic fossils from 164 million years ago show us Vampironassa rodanica, a creature that still retained the aggressive hunting lifestyle of its ancient ancestors. Its 8 arms were equipped with powerful suckers. 2 of those arms were twice as long as the others, specialized for reaching and grasping, and its body was more robust than the modern vampire squid, suggesting it was still an active predator in the mid-water zones of Jurassic oceans. But then something happened. The fossil record shows a gap, a mysterious silence lasting 120 million years, and when vampire squid relatives appear again in the geological record, they have changed profoundly. This gap, sometimes called the Lazarus effect in paleontology, may represent one of the most significant transitions in the vampire squid's evolutionary history. During the Cretaceous period and into the early Cenozoic era, the oceans were changing. Oceanic anoxic events, episodes of widespread oxygen depletion in marine environments, created vast zones where traditional predators could not survive. These oxygen minimum zones expanded and contracted with the rhythms of global climate, but they persisted, and within them, a new opportunity emerged. In 2021, scientists at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute described a fossil from the Oligocene epoch, approximately 30 million years ago, found in Hungary. This fossil, named Necroteuthis hungarica, represents a vampire squid ancestor that had already adapted to life in oxygen-depleted environments. The chemical signatures in the surrounding rock, the types of microfossils preserved alongside it, all pointed to the same conclusion. By the Oligocene, vampire squids had retreated from the shallow, oxygen-rich waters where their ancestors hunted and had instead colonized the bathyal zones, the deep ocean regions where oxygen concentrations were so low that most complex life could not follow. This was not a retreat born of defeat, it was a strategic withdrawal into a refuge where competition virtually ceased to exist. The vampire squid's ancestors found a niche, a narrow band of ocean between 2,000 and 3,000 feet deep, where the pressure was crushing, the temperature hovered between 2 and 6 degrees Celsius, and, most critically, where oxygen saturation dropped to levels that would suffocate nearly any other complex organism. This zone, known today as the oxygen minimum zone, became the vampire squid's fortress. Here, in the darkness and the suffocating water, the vampire squid underwent a radical transformation, evolving adaptations so extreme that they would make the species virtually unique among all cephalopods. The modern vampire squid is small, rarely exceeding 12 inches in total length, with a gelatinous body that appears almost translucent in certain lights. Its coloration varies from a velvety jet black to a deep crimson red depending on the angle of observation and the available light, and this dark pigmentation serves a crucial function in the twilight zone where it lives. Red light cannot penetrate deep into the ocean, its wavelengths absorbed by water within the first few meters of depth, so a creature with red pigmentation appears completely black in the dim bioluminescent glow of the deep sea, rendering the vampire squid nearly invisible to predators hunting from below. But it is the vampire squid's cape that defines its appearance, the feature that gave it its name. A webbing of skin connects its 8 arms, and this webbing can be spread wide or drawn tight around the body. When spread, it creates a parachute-like shape, allowing the squid to drift slowly through the water column. When closed, it forms a protective shroud, hiding the vampire squid's vulnerable body beneath a cloak of darkness. Along the inner surface of this cape, where the webbing meets the arms, rows of fleshy spines called cirri protrude like thorns on a rose stem. These cirri are not weapons, they're soft and harmless, but when the vampire squid inverts its cape in its defensive posture, pulling the webbed arms up and over its body, these spines face outward, creating the illusion of a creature bristling with defensive spikes. This transformation, from a small drifting blob into what appears to be a spined ball of defensive hostility, happens in seconds, and it is accompanied by another remarkable feature. The vampire squid's eyes, proportionally the largest of any animal in the world relative to its body size, at 6 inches in total body length, the vampire squid possesses eyes 2.5 centimeters in diameter. These enormous eyes, which appear blue or red depending on lighting conditions, are exquisitely adapted to detect the faintest traces of bioluminescence in the darkness, allowing the vampire squid to monitor vast volumes of water for the telltale glow of prey aggregations or potential mates, or for the approach of predators moving through the abyss. But the vampire squid's most remarkable adaptation is invisible, hidden within its cells and blood and metabolic machinery. The oxygen minimum zone where it lives contains oxygen saturations as low as 3%, conditions that would cause most complex organisms to suffocate and die within minutes. The vampire squid has evolved to thrive in these conditions through a suite of interconnected adaptations that represent one of the most extreme examples of physiological specialization in the animal kingdom. First, its metabolism is the lowest of any known cephalopod. Squids are typically active, energetic predators with high metabolic demands, burning oxygen quickly to fuel their jet-propelled swimming and their neural processing and their rapid movements. The vampire squid has abandoned this lifestyle entirely. Its metabolism operates at a fraction of the rate of its shallow water relatives, conserving oxygen with ruthless efficiency. One individual, weighing over 2 pounds, recorded a metabolic rate of just 0.02 micromoles of oxygen per gram per hour, the lowest mass-specific metabolic rate ever measured for any cephalopod. This is not simply being slow, this is a fundamental restructuring of cellular respiration, a complete reimagining of how much energy a body needs to maintain itself. Second, the vampire squid's blood is not red, but blue, colored by a respiratory protein called hemocyanin rather than hemoglobin. All cephalopods use hemocyanin, but the vampire squid's version is uniquely efficient, binding and transporting oxygen with an affinity higher than any other cephalopod measured. This high-affinity hemocyanin can extract oxygen from water even when concentrations are desperately low, pulling molecules of oxygen across the gills and into the bloodstream with remarkable efficiency. The gills themselves have evolved an especially large surface area, maximizing the contact between blood and water, and together, this system creates a sufficient oxygen gradient to support the vampire squid's minimal metabolic needs, even in conditions that would asphyxiate its cousins. Third, the vampire squid's body has been stripped of unnecessary weight and muscle. It possesses weak musculature compared to active squids, and its internal shell, the gladius that provides structural support in most cephalopods, has been greatly reduced. But this apparent weakness is compensated by sophisticated balance. The vampire squid's tissues are rich in ammonium ions, a compound that makes its flesh unpalatable to predators while simultaneously matching the density of the surrounding seawater, allowing the creature to maintain neutral buoyancy without effort. It doesn't need to swim constantly to avoid sinking. It can simply float, suspended in the water column, drifting with the currents, conserving every molecule of oxygen for the essential functions of staying alive. This was survival through radical minimalism, through the